This is the Maverick missile. This is the crew of Warrior 23. 5 of these soldiers and 9 altogether were killed by so-called friendly fire. But what did the pilot see before he fired? 5 a.m. in the desert. The Cook Report convoy arrives for its own Operation Desert Storm in the Californian desert, where part of the American task force trained for the Gulf War. On board, an Iraqi Russian-built T-55 tank. This is what the American pilots believed they had targeted, when they had instead locked their missiles onto much smaller British troop carriers. Also in the convoy, the Warrior troop carriers the Hollywood film set makers have built for us. We're putting 8 of them out in battle formation to confront the biggest mystery of the Gulf War. Why didn't the American pilots identify the target correctly before they fired? Tomorrow in Oxford, the inquest is held on Privates Donald, Ferguson and Lang, and Fusiliers Cole, Gillespie, Leach, Satchel, Thompson and Atkinson. The parents know how their sons died, not knowing why is the agony. In the beginning there was misinformation, then there was official reticence. Parents say it was a cover-up. Now they want openness without censorship, or anonymity, or fudge. Unashamedly, Mel Gillespie is bitter, very bitter.
On some days I would call it cold-blooded murder. On a good day I would call it sheer bloody negligence.
The father's anguish comes from the heart. His son Richard was killed in the left-hand vehicle. Warriors 22 and 23, just before they were hit. With the rest of C Company of the 3rd Regiment of the Royal Fusiliers, they were pushing into Iraq. This was their first day of fighting. They'd stopped to blow up Iraqi gun emplacements when the attack occurred.
We do accept that accidents of war do happen. We realise that. But you have to think of an accident of war, as I was told, happening in darkness, in the heat of battle, in poor visibility. That's acceptable. We would have accepted that had it been the truth. When they're standing stationary, with markings clearly visible, broad daylight. So you have to ask yourself, where does an accident of war stop, and where does negligence begin?
The planes, American A-10s.
I think the truth should come out of what really did happen. That's all I'm asking for, is the truth. So that we can let our boys rest in our hearts, as well as rest in peace.
Missiles slung, an A-10 prepares for action. The pilots have made statements, but without being named and without being cross-examined. That, says the family's lawyer, is disgracefully inadequate.
I think this incident has not been properly investigated. You only have to look at other investigations of a similar nature, other fratricide incidents, other investigations into planes that have crashed, to know that this hasn't been properly investigated. And that's a scandal.
The Fusiliers at work, rounding up Iraqi prisoners on the day of the tragedy. The men who died were inside the Warriors when the Maverick struck. They didn't stand a chance. The Ministry of Defence has published a report clearing the British air traffic controllers of responsibility. but couldn't say whether or not the American pilots were to blame. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, confusion.
We thought there was artillery coming down on us, so we just tried to get out of the area as quick as possible. And we didn't know what was going on.
But not for long.
But to be sitting in the back of a wagon, doing absolutely nothing, not knowing what was going on, and just to be hit by friendly aircraft, has left us all, made it worse.
We went through a whole battle without taking one casualty, and then some American comes up and blows away my mates.
The matter is being investigated. It will be quite a relatively simple matter to establish exactly what destroyed the vehicles, and I expect that to be completed soon, and then we will know exactly what happened. It's important that we do.
But we still don't know why it happened, although we do know what destroyed the vehicles. And that raises serious questions about the American conduct of the air war in the Gulf.
Maverick is the ideal air-to-ground weapon system. It provides a quick launch capability in high, medium, or low-level attack profiles that guarantees a sure kill.
Well, the Maverick missile was really added to the airplane as an afterthought. You know, we have this missile mafia in the Air Force that says thou shalt not have an airplane without missiles.
But a sophisticated Gatling gun was designed as the main armament of the A-10, developed for low-level tank busting. David Evans says adding the Maverick was a mistake.
But there's a larger issue here. The missile was added so that the pilot would not have to get close to the target. See, that gun has a much shorter range. It's much more accurate, but it has a shorter range. And the whole idea is to take that big gun up there, sort of stick it down the throat and pull the trigger. But that puts the pilot at risk to enemy ground fire. So one of the elements here that's going on, the theological elements at play here, is to get a missile to allow the pilot to so-called stand off from the target, to shoot out of the range of enemy anti-aircraft artillery or AAA.
So the Maverick system was part of an American scheme to work high and safe whilst recording what happened. Videotapes like this are routinely made of A-10 operations, but the tapes of the friendly fire incident, according to the Americans, showed nothing of consequence. They've since been erased.
Once Maverick is launched, the missile tenaciously guides to its target with a high kill probability.
You look at a warm spot on the screen, the blob looks like a tank. You talk to somebody on the radio, hope that he says everything's all right, and you fire off at this warm blob on the screen. That's the chances under those circumstances of hitting friendlies are very high, much too high to accept.
Of course, there's only a problem if the pilot is given or selects the wrong target. On January the 26th, that's exactly what happened. And one of the issues tomorrow's inquest will be asked to decide is whether the pilots or the air traffic controllers, known as DALOs, were to blame for the wrong target being attacked.
Standard procedure that you will pass coordinates, is standard procedure that you will read back coordinates. In this incident that we're alluding to or talking about, the DALO stated that he passed coordinates. The air crews in question have both stated they did not receive those coordinates.
According to official British battle plans, the A-10s had been tasked by the British air traffic controller to attack the T-55 tanks and were told there were no friendlies within 10 kilometers. But they actually attacked the nearest friendlies, a convoy of 37 Warriors and support vehicles, 23 kilometers away. And there's conflicting evidence as to why they acquired the wrong target.
You know, I won't say that the statements are incorrect or refute on either side, but there's a situation there that the coordinates were not read back. The air crews probably didn't hear them or didn't copy them in the other transmissions that were going on the radio.
Communication is one problem, flying height another. The A-10s were not allowed below 8,000 feet. The British Tornadoes flew at 250 feet, as could the A-10. But the high British Tornado losses in the Gulf were considered unacceptable by the Americans. To the British, it was heroism. To the Americans, political suicide at home. So politics set the agenda for the disaster. In America, where we're putting the warriors together, friendly fire has become a big debate. 11 Americans were killed too. But after one of the pilots involved was named and then pilloried, the American military closed ranks and the right to know became a casualty. And that's why we're here. These look like bits of any film set, but soon, when we take to the air, they'll look like a line of warriors in battle formation, as if ready to play their part in a high-tech war. After all, that's what the Gulf War was. Night after night on our screens, we saw missiles which sent back pictures as they threaded into Baghdad buildings, seeking Saddam Hussein's bunker. But on the ground, it was a low-tech war. When it came to signaling to your own side that you were friendly, the identification often depended on little more than black V-marks and bits of fluorescent Fablon. On that fatal day, the fleet sergeant was Trevor Smith.
Part of my job there was to ensure that the markings were put on them, on the fleet's vehicles, and I actually put them on myself.
He showed us where they were put, describing the colours and how the inverted V-marks were applied. Have you any doubt at all that you put those markings on properly and that they weren't obscured by anything?
No, as I said, you know, my job was to put them on there and, you know, and they could be seen. And that's what they were there for. And I've no doubt in my mind, you know, they could be seen.
As one soldier said, they cleaned those markings because their lives depended on them. Friendly fire markings should have saved the crews of Warriors 22 and 23. So should the shape of their vehicles. They're nothing like that of a T-55. The T-55 has a massive gun barrel. The Warrior doesn't. The T-55's turret, hull and tracks are larger, and its overall outline is different. Even if the issue of identification is set aside, another key question is why the A-10 pilots were in completely the wrong place. One explanation is that the A-10 pilots were instructed to take directions to the targeted T-55s by a returning F-16 fighter. We now know that there were 2 F-16s in the area, and mistakenly combining the directions from the first F-16 with the position of the second, in other words, starting from the wrong place, had the effect of moving the target area to the exact position of the Warriors. And there's another question. When did they realize they'd hit friendlies? The pilots in their statements said that it wasn't until they'd landed. However,
They've refueled about an hour ago. They've clearly got a couple to 3 hours of fuel left. They stumble across, virtually, as they describe it, the juiciest target imaginable in the closing hours of the war, an apparently unscathed battalion's worth of armored vehicles in trains spread across the desert. I mean, this is a perfect tank plinking situation. Fire and just work your way down. But they don't do that. They each take a shot and claim in their statements low fuel and go home. And indeed, why'd they leave?
This incident.
And secondly, why did they leave without saying anything to anybody else about what a juicy target this is? I mean, this is like lions to the wounded deer when you're talking about the mentality of a pilot. Gang in there, pile up on it, and take it all out.
parents and relatives hope the truth will finally emerge from the fog of war at the inquest, which begins at County Hall in Oxford tomorrow.
Well, why should there be a cover-up? The families have a right to know. Why, whoever it is was killed, a son, husband, shouldn't be kept in the dark like this.
The relatives say it's still dark. Each hard-won piece of information about identification or location has raised more questions than it's answered. And once a pilot has pressed the trigger, it's too late to exercise restraint.
Any ordnance that departs an airplane, be it a missile, a bomb, or whatever, as it departs the airplane, it is no longer, the weapon itself is not going to discriminate the target. It's equal opportunity. And it's an equal opportunity weapon. The discrimination has to come before the ordnance is released.
Discrimination can be exercised by what the military call deductive recognition. To some, the equivalent of firing on circumstantial evidence alone.
Deductive recognition is a buzzword invented by the high-tech theologians to make a problem go away. The problem that you got to be able to separate friend from foe, and to do that you have to be close and absolutely certain. So use the word deductive recognition to say that, well, you don't really have to be real close, and you don't really have to positively see that the outline of this tank is American, not Soviet. We'll use other factors. We'll talk to some people on the radio. We'll check our navigation system. We'll use some prior intelligence. And we'll put all these wonderful things together in some vague and unspecified way, and that will be adequate assurance that we're not going to shoot up our friends. Of course, it's not adequate, and the whole notion is nothing but fluff.
But in this case, the pilots claimed they'd attempted to identify the target visually. So we decided to do the same in the Californian desert. And to make sure our effort was as realistic as possible, we took along 3 British survivors from the incident and an experienced American A-10 pilot.
Here we are, out in the desert. Temperature over 100. Pretty hot. And those are your warriors. What do you think, lads?
Good, yeah. Just looking back there, really, it's the same thing. Everything's exactly the same.
You're saying it takes you back?
Oh, yeah. Same positions where there was. No, I was in the rear of the vehicle, in the back.
How about you, Ken?
I was in the top, the commander in the top.
You?
I'll have been in the back as well.
Right.
When you stop, it's very disorientating. You don't know which way you're facing. You've got to know exactly what's happening. When you get out, to the left, to the right. I had the smoke cleared, and I noticed 2 of the lads who were sitting opposite me in the vehicle. They were screaming. They come running out the vehicle and ran round the front of the vehicle round the right-hand side into the front. A bit shocked, like just natural, was just to follow them. And then, as we were making our way towards a safety vehicle, they just heard another bang. Just thought, that's it. We're not going to last long here.
Two seemed to lift off the ground from the ball of flames. It just exploded. So I was on the radio then. I told my commander, my platoon commander, that 2-2 been hit. And I'm going to move forward and see if there's any casualties about. Good friends.
The only way I can explain it is, if you've ever lost a brother, I lost 9 brothers who would have died for me. I'd have died for them in the same circumstances, because we were a good platoon, good unit. It's happened in every war so far, and it'll happen in every war in the future. But the point is, there's a bit of a cover-up. I mean, if it was if they told the truth and told the reason why it happened, maybe the parents could understand that and accept why the sons had died, but somebody's telling pork pies along the line.
Well, I know what happened, and I want the parents to know what happened. I'd like them to admit whatever they know. I think covers something up. I think this today will help the parents. They'll get a clearer picture of what happened.
Well, you've flown A-10s in the Gulf, and you've just flown over this lot. What was your impression?
When I first flew over, I was amazed at these mock-ups that are out here. I first wondered where they got all this machinery from. The vehicles are incredibly realistic. It almost gave me goosebumps with the sand and the sun beating down on us, and the color of the vehicles, too.
Just what could the lead pilot have seen from 8,000 feet when he says he took the decision to fire? There are reasons for the plane we chose. It doesn't look like an A-10, but it flies at the same low speed and has the same field of vision. The soldiers told us the weather conditions were virtually the same, but of course I'm no Top Gun and there isn't a war on. At 15,000 feet, the lead pilot of the A-10 first checked his identification of the column of vehicles.
By all appearances, I thought they were T-55 tanks and associated support.
So what did I see?
We're at 15,000 feet, and through the naked eye you can just see a row of 8 oblong objects. You can perhaps tell they're vehicles if you squint hard through binoculars, standard military issue.
Not surprising to an untrained observer like me, the plane is 3 miles up. But in his statement, the pilot is adamant.
Friendly markings could be observed on other vehicles during the war at 15,000 feet.
The pilot's second run was at 8,000 feet with binoculars. This was when he took his decision to fire.
At 8,000 you can see much more clearly that they're vehicles of some sort. Through binoculars you can pick out the shape. Can't really tell whether there's any turret or any armor on it. If you look very carefully in this light, you can get just a flash of the day-glow identification panels.
Of course, a human eye is sharper than a video camera, though there's nothing special about my eyesight, and I've had no target recognition training. The A-10 pilot saw things differently.
No friendly panels were observed on any of the vehicles I searched, and using binoculars at 8,000 feet gave me a clear view.
I could see they weren't T-55 tanks, and I could see just the flash of friendly panels. So why couldn't the A-10 pilot?
At 8,000 feet, at 10,000 feet, with binoculars, without them, I didn't find it a problem. And if it was, we always sent one guy down while the other guy was covered, watched what was going on, make sure that the guy that was going down to take a closer look wasn't getting shot on. If he was, he'd help him out. And then we'd verify that that was the target and that was a friendly, and that's how we would do that.
You seem to be saying it isn't too difficult to get it right.
Well, you can come up with situations, weather, blowing sand, clouds, you're too high, you're not in the target area. Certainly you can come up with situations where you're not going to see it.
But at 8,000 feet in good conditions, identification should be fairly easy.
Yes, I would say that. That would be the case.
Why the pilots couldn't identify the target in the critical moments before firing will be a very hard question to answer at tomorrow's inquest. The coroner has no power to call foreign witnesses. The American government has decided not to send them, and the pilots have declined our request for an interview.
I would like the pilots to come forward and actually tell us what actually did happen, not what they wrote down in their statements and say that happened. We want to know what exactly did happen, because we just don't believe the statements at all. We just don't believe what they're telling us. No.
So the question remains, what did the pilots see before they fired? General Chuck Horner, the man in charge of air operations in the Gulf, has accused the parents and the media of picking at scabs, because they want an answer.